Yeah, hi there, Victor Pross speaking to you, anarchist artist. Okay, today we're going to continue our talks about the popular internet philosopher Stefan Molyneux, who is a rather controversial figure in many circles, and given the subject matter of his talks covering the spectrum of parenting, public schooling, religion, and government, it's inevitable that he will piss people off. And it's often said that the two subjects we shouldn't discuss in mixed company, of course, as the bromide goes, is religion and politics. But that list can now include that third elephant in the room, abusive parenting. And in this video, that's exactly what we're going to fucking talk about. Back in the late 1990s, when Stefan and I used to discuss these topics over coffee, we especially had an interest in the politics of power paradigms, such as the family, religion, and the state. These are the social institutions that leave an indelible effect on the life and mind of the individual. These are the pillars of society: the family, religion, and government. Well, with very few exceptions, the parenting we received was, at its worst, horrid and abusive, and at its best, highly inadequate. Given the philosophical climate of the culture, traditional parenting is one of browbeating, authoritarianism, spanking, timeouts, treating the child like just so much as a little bundle of original sin who needs to be beaten into conformist compliance. That is traditional parenting. And from the biological prison, as the saying goes, of our parents, we are released into the world, where the abuse and manipulation continues, and that is where religion and the state enters the picture, particularly the latter, the state. And experiencing years of authoritarian parents during our formative years often determines how we perceive our relationship to the state, which is more often than not one of conformity, compliance, having accepted its unilateral authority. And when a child is exposed to top-down authoritarian hierarchical styles of parenting, the state merely feels like home by the time the child reaches adulthood. We might not be able to do much regarding the encroachment of the state into our personal lives, but we most certainly do have a fucking choice when it comes to our parents. And we don't need to be held in mental bondage. We have to put up with the state. We have to put up with the income tax and follow whatever unjust laws there are. That is, if we don't want to be cuffed with the wrist bracelet courtesy of the state and be provided with room and board at the federal inn, that is. But to get to the DEFOO. Okay, now, Stefan Molyneux did not invent the practice of defooing. DEFOO simply means to dissociate from and to ostracize your family of origin. FOO is an acronym used in the psychological community. It stands for the family of origin, and FOO is to be distinguished between one's birth family and one's marital family. Your family of origin could be your biological parents, of course, adoptive parents, step-parents, grandparents, anyone who's considered to be the primary caregiver. It's an old idea. The concept of defooing is not new. It's been practiced for decades. However, in the past decade, it's gained a lot of traction in the voluntarist movement as a result of Stefan Molyneux. But prior to Molyneux, there is the book How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World by Harry Brown. There's all types of literature that deals with the subject of DEFOO. There's the book The Debt, When Terrible Abusive Parents Come Crawling Back. What Do Their Grown Children Owe Them by Emily Offey. There's John Bradshaw, and even Dr. Phil completely supports the practice of DEFOO. And one of the leading pioneers of familial relationships, of course, is Susan Forward, who wrote Toxic Parents, Overcoming Their Hurtful Legacy and Reclaiming Your Life. And then there's Richard Friedman, MD, who wrote When Parents Are Too Toxic to Tolerate. He writes, "You can divorce an abusive spouse. You can call it quits if your lover mistreats you, but what can you do if the source of your misery is your own parent?" To continue a quote here, "All too often I think therapists have a bias to salvage relationships, even those that might be harmful to a patient. Instead, it's crucial to be open-minded and to consider whether maintaining the relationship is really healthy and desirable." And Friedman concludes, "Sometimes, as drastic as it sounds, that means letting go of a toxic parent." So, we can see clearly that Stefan is not the only thinker to tackle this subject, but however, where Stefan does get into hot water is with the application of defooing to philosophy, specifically moral philosophy. And as to be expected, a lot of parents are very hostile to the very idea that their children should hold them to any moral standards. You see, the street runs one way, pretty much like the state. You see the similarities, right? Now, Molyneux holds that the parental abuse of children is the greatest evil in the world today, which is largely responsible and begets all the other evils in the world, such as religious fanaticism, bigotry, statism, nationalism, top-down authoritarian models that throttle the minds of the very young. And we can see that the parental abuse can contaminate all of our other relationships. You do see that. That includes our romantic life. Sometimes we find ourselves with an abusive spouse, and once again, it just feels like home. But, however, in the same way that having an abusive spouse is unhealthy, continuing to see abusive parents is also unhealthy. The rules don't change. The moral standards and values you hold when it comes to selecting lovers and friends, chosen relationships, logically applies to one's family members, which are unchosen relationships, at the very least. If you are on the receiving end of a long line of abuse, verbally, emotionally, physically, you owe it to yourself to take an objective stock of your familiar relationships for the sake of your happiness. You must understand you have one life to live. The people we let into our lives at whatever level of intimacy is a matter of choice. It's a choice we make for the attainment of personal happiness. Take it serious. Take your relationships seriously. All relationships. There's no unchosen obligations. Your familiar relationships, although having the enormous potential for personal happiness, don't get me wrong, they're not sacred. They're not to be cleaved to come hell or high water. That these relationships are to be held to the exact same standard you hold when it comes to others. Now, Stefan Molyneux's critics insist that the reason you might be contemplating breaking off abusive relationships, family relationships, you see, that springs from the persuasive verbal trickery of an internet philosopher. You know, instead of your actual experiences with these fucking assholes. No, that's not it. No, it's not the promptings of your own heart and mind. No, it's the silver tongue of Stefan Molyneux. Yes, that's what it is, you see. And that is, by implication, they're calling you a fucking idiot who's dangling from puppet strings. You see, it's just more abuse. Just more abuse. Now it's coming over the fucking internet. Like you don't have enough problems. But however, you know, to leave or not to leave. You know, Molyneux will often say that he doesn't advocate just leaving your parents. He tells you to get close to them. Try reaching out and communicate with them. Have the talk. Have the talk. Have the open dialogue. The unvarnished open dialogue. Talk about the past. Talk about how you're feeling. See what happens. See what happens. That's all. See what happens. Do they get angry? Are they going to skirt the issue? Do they fluff it off? Make you feel like an asshole for bringing it up? Watch the reactions. This is not for their sake. It's for your sake. The truth is that if your parents abused you, there is zero potential for a relationship with them. A real relationship. Talking openly and honestly with your parents is solely for the purpose of achieving your own certainty, gaining that closure. There is no restitution possible for egregious child abuse. If you have DEFOO'd, you have my moral support. I will grant you the assumption that you're a thinking person who made a wise and necessary action in the quest for your personal happiness, however painful it might have been. You can feel free to contact me. Believe me, I have much experience with this topic. I will give you my support. I will give you the respect of acknowledging your right to pursue your happiness. I'll grant that. Now, often, sometimes we find, most especially in families, you'll have phrases like "family first," we're family, unconditional love, blood is thicker than water, these fluffy bullshit bromides. They're often used as weapons that keep us tied, regardless of any actions that comes from the parents or other family members, for that matter. They're not having a real dialogue with you. They're just throwing out all these fluffy bromides. Well, we're family, unconditional love. And blood is thicker than water, don't you know? It's bullshit. Okay, it's just bullshit. Okay, now there are too many people who still feel that they owe a duty to that abstraction called family. See, this is where they twist you around their fingers with the language, But we're family. Forget about the abstraction family. Look at the concrete people. Too many people still feel that they owe a duty to that abstraction called family. No matter if it's filled with concrete, vile people who make up the abstraction. Fuck the abstractions. Fuck the abstractions. That's what I tell you. Forget the abstractions. And there's a great cause of unhappiness for those who are caught between duty and feeling. Pay attention to your feelings. The culture is filled with duty-oriented people who walk all the days of their life on this earth with a gray cloud of duty hanging over them. There are people who ascribe to the doctrine of allegiance to the state, the hollow jingoism of nationalism, imbued into their brains with steadfast loyalty to an abstraction called the state, no matter how destructive the state is. And there's a similar goose-step allegiance to other traditions, which is, of course, the family. Put aside the abstraction family with all of the hallmark fuzziness with which the word carries. Look at the flesh and blood people. Look at the people. That's all. Just look at the people. And fuck political labels, too. Forget about all the political labels. You might be a voluntarist or whatever. Forget about who's the Democrat in your family. Forget about who's the Republican or the liberal or the conservative. Look at the people. Of course, political ideas have ethical implications, but that's the point. Look at the fucking ethics of the situation. Ask yourself, who are these people? How do they treat you? Is there really a genuine relationship there? Do you look forward to seeing them? Or are you weighed down by that barking command called duty, which is, as a matter of fact, a supreme psychological killer and prescription for unhappiness? You have one life to live in this world. One life, that's all you have. It's not a fucking dress rehearsal. Don't fuck it up. Victor Pross signing out, anarchist artist. Pop goes to culture.